Hi everyone, my name's Sophie. I work for Star Academies, a big multi-academy trust with schools across the country. I'm not a teacher, but I am a mum, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in feeling under pressure during the kind of getting used to the changes that we've seen while trying to keep things normal for my kids. Here at Star, we wanted to put something together for all those across the country trying to support children with home-based learning, while juggling all the other demands on your time. We hope to run a broadcast like this each week with a different idea to keep your kids learning and engaged. I'm thrilled to introduce our first guest for StarLive, Matt Hood. Matt is the principal at the newly formed Oak National Academy, which has been created to provide lessons delivered by real teachers. To date, over 800,000 have accessed Oak lessons. Matt is also a chair of governors for a school and a coordinator for Research Ed Home. All of these roles mean Matt is in a really good place to talk about how to make learning at home work really well. So thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question, I guess, is home isn't school. And as I said, I'm not a teacher. So what is it I should be aiming for with home learning?
So I think the first thing that it's really helpful for us to do is to just talk a little bit about why learning is really important. And it sounds obvious, but I think if we get the rationale for this right, it will help us understand, why this is something that is really important, but why we've got to think really carefully about how we make sure that it happens. So learning is a good thing. That's pretty obvious, but it's good, I think, for two reasons. The first one is it's just a good in itself. We're humans, part of this grand global civilization that have been creating and curious since we first emerged in our current evolved state. And we like figuring things out. We like learning about them. Things are interesting, and it is good to know things just because that's a good in itself. We don't need to think about why are we learning it for a purpose. Learning stuff is interesting, and it soothes the soul. And so that's the first, I think, really important reason why we should keep trying to learn at home. And the second reason is the studies are really clear that learning is really good for both our health and our happiness. And people who leave school with a really good clutch of qualifications, with lots of knowledge and lots of skills, live longer, they earn more over their lifetime, and they're able to choose things that they want to do and want to be, and that in itself is a really important feature of being happy. So the first thing to say is learning's really important. It's really important because it's a good in itself. It's really important because it helps us to be healthy and happy and successful in our lives. Now, we get a really special, precious period of time when we're small humans. We get to go to school, and we get one shot at that. We don't get to often repeat that process. And it's looking like some kind of disruption to our school system that it's going to last about a term. So that is something like 325-ish hours of lessons. Wow. That our pupils would have had in schools, and we're now going to try our very best to replicate at home. Now, this is the most important caveat that I would want parents to know and hear and understand. And I mentioned to you earlier, I'm one of 11 in a group of brothers and sisters in law. I have 11 nephews and nieces, so I'm from a very big family, and this is the message that I sort of say to my brothers and sisters really regularly. The UK has one of the best education systems in the world, and our schools are fine-tuned to make sure that every pupil makes the most out of every single one of those 325 hours. They are packed with expert teachers who work their socks off for the nation's children, for your children. So it is impossible. We are never going to be able to replicate that exact system at home, despite our best efforts and intentions.
Yeah.
And so I really want parents to know and understand that nobody is expecting that to be the case at home. There's just no way, particularly if you're working alongside having your children at home, or you've got to go to work and you're juggling that with all of your other commitments, that we're going to be able to replicate school at home. That's not going to happen. What we can do, I think, and why this conversation is great, is we can work together, you as the expert in your kids and your family and your household, and us as experts in teaching and learning, running schools with lots of people all at the same time. We can talk to each other and share ideas and all do the best that we possibly can. And I think we can do a good job, but I wouldn't want anybody coming into this feeling like, what I've got to do is, recreate these institutions, which we have 23,000 of, and people work incredibly hard to make as good as they possibly can. I need to replicate that in my living room. Like, that's an ask too far.
Okay. That's really, that is reassuring. As you were building that up there, I was worried you were about to say, now off you go. And so I suppose one of the issues that comes up is about how to manage behaviour. Certainly one of the questions that's come up on StarLine, which is our new parent helpline, has been how can we establish really good behaviour for learning at home, even if the children used to behave well when they were going to school?
Because you gave me a really helpful heads up about the sorts of questions that were coming through StarLine, which, by the way, I think is superb, and I would really encourage anybody who's struggling to pick up the phone and give you a call. I went back to the research on this. Now, we don't have very much research, or at least I couldn't put my fingers on very much research about what this looks like at home, but we do have quite a lot of research about what this looks like at school. And so I went back to that research, and hopefully there's some things in that research that tell us some strategies and some approaches that are likely to result in more harmonious home environments than some parents might currently feel they have. So let's walk through them. I think there's 4 things to say. So the first one is, nothing is going to work off the shelf here. And anybody tells you that there is a system or a magic trick to this is unfortunately telling a tall tale. What is going to work for you depends on a whole load of things about your family circumstances that you are the expert in. And when people might be coming to and from work, when people might be coming to and from other activities that they need to do, how many pupils you've got in your home school and how they interact with each other, what sorts of times you normally eat, and what does the rhythm of your day look like. So the first thing, really important message, you've got to make something your own. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some principles that can help you get to what that looks like for you. So let's walk through then 3 other things that I think are really important. So one of the things that the research tells us in schools is that, there's some jargon here, so brace yourself. So while classroom level strategies have a big impact on pupil behaviour, consistency and coherence at a whole school level have even more impact. Let me go through that. So what that's basically saying is, although you can put some routines in your classroom, Mr. Hood, as the economics teacher, and actually the thing that is going to mean that you can be successful in your classroom is the school as a whole having a consistent and coherent, so a stable, a regular approach to how it manages behaviour. Now, I think there's something really interesting in that for parents, which is, although an individual approach that you might be trying to take to an individual child in an individual lesson, you're working maybe one-on-one, or they're using their device, or they're going through a workbook. Although the strategy might work in that situation, in that moment, actually trying to think about this as a whole household approach to getting behaviour right is probably going to be a little bit more successful. what do I mean by that? How does that get practical? So thinking about things like, what is the structure of the day at 5 Canal Reach where I live, right? What are we going to do each day? And, literally get a piece of paper, divide it up into hour slots throughout the day, and have a think about, like, what does that structure look like for you? Because if you can have a consistent approach for everybody in the household, we all do these sorts of things together, then we all do our learning together, then we're having lunch, and then we're having some more learning, and then we're doing fun afternoon time, like whatever that structure looks like for you. If you can think about it at the whole household level, in our case, if we're teachers, the whole school level, rather than the individual classroom level and piece by piece, I think that's a pretty good bet for helping give your kids some like routine and structure to their day. And, make Monday to Friday look very different to Saturday to Sunday. Make the term time look very different to the holidays. We all do well when we've got that kind of structure and routine. And so thinking really hard about it, drawing it up, stick it on the fridge. I think that's a helpful shunt from what the research tells us is likely to work.
Okay.
So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, I think once you've got that structure, one of the things that schools just absolutely rely on is establishing and reinforcing those routines, often through positive reinforcement. So once you've decided that this is the structure of the day, what that effectively means is, like, do everything in your power to stick to it. And that is the single hardest thing in all of this, right? Like, I do not for a second underestimate how difficult that must be in lots of households around the country. But the more we can stick to routines, the more likely they are to become a routine, and the more success we're going to see over time. And, again, like any school, the first week of implementing those routines is easily the hardest. Stick with it. Once you've got, like, this is our structure for our family day, sticking with that routine, I think is really critical, and doing whatever you can to insist on a regular routine it is really important. I think the final thing that I'd say is don't underestimate what your kids are motivated by. So this is something that preoccupies a lot of teacher time, right? How do we get the kids motivated to do the thing that we want? And, people, big people and small people, are motivated by two things: intrinsic things about their identity and their values. So talking to them about, we really value hard work. They've tried really hard. They are, this is going to help them when they grow up to be who they want to be and to have that dream that they might have. And then factors, so things that we can do to reward and sanction the sorts of behaviours that we want to see day in, day out. If A, then B, and if A equals B every time, if you misbehave, that always results in this action, is another thing that schools just have to rely on. And so thinking about the final tip, thinking about those two things: what can I say and do about motivating my pupil because they're inside, they're motivated to learn, and that's a really good thing. And then what can I do with rewards, time on the computer console at the end of the day, playing out for their exercise, whatever their favorite tea, whatever those things might be, use them. And also sanctions, need to be really clear with parents that this is a important way in which schools manage behaviour, and is important for everybody. No mobile phone time if you're 13 or 14 years old tends to be a motivating factor.
I'm sure.
So I'm going to summarise 4 things. Like, you've got to make this your own. No one's going to be able to tell you what the answer is because you are the expert in your family. 3 practical things: think about the structure of your day, write it out on a piece of paper, stick it on the fridge. Try wherever possible to stick to that rhythm. And everybody falls off the wagon with their routines. We all do it with our diets and our exercise and all of that. So where you won't be the first person, but try to stick to that routine, and use Mondays as a really good opportunity to reset. And we did it 80% of the time last week. Let's try and get to 90% this week. And then the third one is like, think about motivation, internal things that are going to motivate your child, but also some of those external things. Rewards have a place, as do sanctions.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thanks, Matt. And really useful for me for thinking about with my kids as well. Now, one of the things that has been an issue for me and for some of my friends that I've been talking to is obviously the sector's moved fast and there's loads of resources out there. There's so much going on to support home learning, but it's overwhelming. So how can we find the right stuff and good stuff to use with our kids?
So the first thing that I would say is you are top of the pile in expert in your kid. The person who's next down in the pecking order of expert in your kid is their own school. And the first thing that I would look to if I was a parent is, what is it that my school is saying is going to be best for my children in the situation that they're in. And I know that there is incredible work going on across the system from thousands of schools who are putting together weekly packages or monthly packages and getting those home for pupils to do. One of the things that I think is often under the surface in schools is we have to think really hard about everything we're going to teach and the order that we teach it in, right the way from when our pupils are 4 years old all the way through to when they're 19 years old. And that sequence is really important because it means that the foundation stuff before we make it more complicated. And so partly because your school knows your kid, and partly because of the importance of this sequence, going to them first about what is it my children should be learning is really important. If for whatever reason your kids completed all of that work, or you haven't had that from the school that your children go to, there are a number of places that you can go for additional resources. So we're one of them. We were created by 40 volunteer teachers who have done that curriculum sequence. Right, and I plan to do it right for the full term. The lessons are an hour long. They include videos and quizzes, and they work on any device, including things like your smart TV. We had about 100 kids last week doing it on their PlayStation, which is a testament to their steely determination to learning rather than playing on computer games. And so looking for resources like that. BBC Bite Size similarly has resources. A group of schools called Outward have resources. A group of schools called Greenshaw have resources. So all of those options try as much as possible to replicate what would happen in school. That is, there's roughly this thing called a lesson. It's roughly an hour long. It has a range of different activities that people might do. And crucially, that lesson is put into a sequence that builds over time so that the content gets more and more complicated. They're the sorts of packages that I would be looking out for. Okay. Most of them are freely available. Ours certainly is. There's no cost. You can go on the website right now and take a look. But that's how I would sort of start thinking about prioritizing. First of all, I would go to my school. Second of all, I'd say, look, which of these resources replicates as close as possible the things that would happen in a school, and crucially tries to sequence them so that the content gets more and more sophisticated and difficult each week and stretches the kids that little bit more.
Okay, great. And we're going to put the links to those resources that you've suggested under this video so that people can find it. And I suppose a little plug for us that if you're dealing with any of those resources and you get stuck, or you're looking for something to supplement something that your school's provided, or you need to understand a little bit more about how it works, then you can give StarLine a call, and our specialists are on hand to kind of help you with those questions. So the last couple of questions I wanted to ask come from StarLine, and from the parents that we've heard from in the last few days since our launch on Friday. The first one you've alluded to already, actually, but we've had a lot of parents saying, what do I do if I don't have a laptop or a tablet to use for all of this? Resource seems to be great, but it needs a computer.
So this is a big problem. And it's not just about devices as well. It's also about broadband access or data access, even if you do have a device. So first thing to say is we're waiting on the details, but the government has launched a scheme, which I know you've been having lots of questions about, that will get more devices to more pupils. And I think that's a really good thing, and we need to do more on that to get those pupils, as many pupils as possible, with a device. The second thing to say is think creatively about the device. So our resources are designed to go on any sort of device that you might have in your home, including your smart TV, which sometimes gets forgotten off the list. But no illusions, some households, I grew up in one of those households, wouldn't have a device like the one that you've mentioned, and that is a big challenge. And the third thing I would say is there are some resources that are either available directly from your school because they're posting out, or, and this is where the BBC is particularly brilliant, are broadcast through the telly. And whilst, again, not everybody has a telly, most people, if they don't have a device, do have a telly. And so looking at the BBC education resources and getting those directly through the TV rather than devices, or indeed, maybe you've got one device and you're trying to share that amongst 2 or 3 kids. That's another big challenge. You can rotate that around with some learning through BBC from the telly, somebody maybe using Oak on their mobile, and somebody else doing worksheets, hard copy that have been provided by their school. Between those options, I would hope that we can cover the vast majority of pupils. But if none of those options work for you, I would really encourage you to get in touch with your school, have a conversation with them, because again, they're going to be the people who are best able to help you get hold of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put a link again below the website, below this video, about with a link to the website that has more information about the DFE scheme. Thank you. And then a nearly final question. What's your top tip for keeping kids happy and healthy during this unusual time?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I use this language of structure of the day, rather than timetable is what we probably call it in a school, is because what I think it is good to think about is the sum total of things that might happen in your family's routine on any given day. And as I said at the start, I'm a teacher. It's bred into me. I'm a strong advocate for everybody continuing to do some sort of learning at home, whatever that might look like. But the structure of your day should be so much more than that. And including into that routine some time for exercise, whether you're doing Joe Wicks PE in the morning or going for a run around in the park, whatever that exercise looks like for you, getting outside and using your hour daily sanctioned exercise entitlement, I would strongly encourage. But then also other things, reading is really, really important, and it's a great opportunity for families to read together and to get their favorite books. And then also like making things, cooking together is a really, not if you're as bad a cook as I am, but if you're a better cook than I am, if you're my mum, who's a great cook, then cooking together and those sorts of activities, I think, thinking about them in the broader sense and the structure of your day allows us to take care, yes, of your learning needs, your cognitive needs, but also your sort of wider well-being needs. We know that mental well-being is really closely correlated with exercise, for example. So making sure you do get up and about and get some fresh air, whatever format that looks like for you, is really important.
Great, thank you so much. And so just to summarize, could you give us 3 main things that you want us to take away from today's broadcast?
Sure. So just 3. So I would say I'm gonna do three with part A, B, and C here. So you just have to keep me honest. The first thing that I would say is learning's a really good thing, and it's really important. And it's really important because it's a good in itself, and it's great to know about things that we didn't previously know about. But it's also really important for our long-term health and happiness and our ability to choose who we want to be. And we can't afford to miss a whole term's worth of learning for the nation's pupils. So learning's really important, I think, is one thing that I would like to say. And the second thing that I would like to say is nobody's expecting you to recreate a school at home. That just is not possible. You have expertise in your own pupils and probably something else besides. Maybe you're a doctor or a nurse, or maybe you've got some other job or profession. You're great at those things. Teaching takes a long time to master. It's really difficult. And what we ask teachers to do is to think about the thinking of 30 small humans simultaneously. It's really, really difficult. No one's expecting you to do that at home. What we're trying to do is work together to do our best in the circumstances that we find ourselves. And then the third thing that I would say is make a plan that's right for you. Think about the structure of your day. Try and keep as good a alignment with that structure. Try and deliver the structure each day as often as you possibly can. And have high expectations of your children. Motivate them by rewards and sanctions if you need to get them to stick in that structure. Once you've got through a week of it, I promise the next week gets easier. Every teacher in the country promises you once you've got through that first week, the next week gets easier. And so just do your best with thinking about that structure and making it one that's right for you.
That you crammed a lot into those three.
I did. I like that. Sorry.
And I think I don't think I'm alone in having gained a newfound respect for my kids' teachers on being able to do all of that you say. It's definitely a skill. Well, thank you so much, Matt. That was really great and such a useful insight into how we can learn at home with our kids. We'll be back again next week. At the same time, 8:30 on a Wednesday, just before Joe Wicks, if you're off to do your exercise now. If you found this episode helpful, please recommend it to your friends and family. Next week, our episode is the one about staying connected, and we're looking forward to speaking to one of our teachers about that. If you wish to use StarLine, our helpline for further advice, information or guidance, however small, please pick up the phone. The number's at the bottom of the screen. It's 0330 313 9162. We're open 6 days a week. You can find our opening times on our website, which is starline.org.uk. We aim to be here for you throughout this lockdown. In the meantime, stay home, stay safe. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.